So as I'm watching the interview between Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin, I had noticed that Vladimir Putin would often reference, let's say, past Russian lands that they have conquered or their particular anniversary that they have imprinted in world's history as having a 1,000-year-old nation that they can claim within that chronological order. Now, why is that important to understand? I mean, first and foremost, we know that Conor McGregor has met with Vladimir Putin, if you remember, back in 2018 when I believe they had some sort of FIFA tournament going on there, or maybe even the World Cup in and of itself. But nonetheless, that was a prelude to the Conor McGregor and the Khabib undisputed 155 championship fight, in which Conor McGregor was coming off of a Floyd Mayweather match, if you guys had remember, back in 2017. But either way, the one question remains is that are they going to make a 165-pound belt for Conor and Chandler just so they can create a new division, and not only that, give some sort of stake of claim for Conor McGregor to even boost their company's entire bottom dollar. And now imagine just Conor being a champion, a 3 world champion. And how about this? What if he is somehow going to be scheduled for UFC 300 and not the past 300, 301 or 302? Then you got to consider that it's going to be symbolic. He's going to be a 3-weight world champion in UFC 300. And it's a great marketing sell for the UFC. Here's a couple of issues, though. The UFC has yet to announce anything that is going on with his fights. Now, why is that problematic? For one, we're keeping Conor very inactive. This is going to somehow, in some kind of capacity, hinder his skills as he's going to move forward into his career. There's just no denying that. That's just what you're going to face with inactivity and the fact that he has all these negotiation issues going on with the UFC. Or is it that the UFC sort of understands that this guy right here is debilitated due to his drug use, and they're just not putting it out there because of, well, public scrutiny that either Conor McGregor or the UFC will face? But I gotta tell you, back in the days, it wasn't like this on his come up. Because I gotta tell you, those times right there that you're going to see highlights from BT Sports, TNT Sports, RTE Sports TV up in Ireland and elsewhere in ESPN, all those old school highlights and films that you've seen him in his prime, I think is going to live forever. And again, going back to the beginning of the content, this is why I referenced Vladimir Putin shouting out and referencing all the accomplishments of the Russian Empire in order to solidify, let's say, what they are doing in Ukraine at the current moment of time, or to justify their claim to certain lands and certain resources within Ukraine that used to be a former Russian state or part of the Russian Empire. And this is in the same way that the UFC could potentially justify a title shot or an inaugural 165 belt for Conor McGregor based on the fact that he has a certain lineage of titles and accomplishments, and real heavy accomplishments that brought the company a lot of money. If you remember when he became the double champ, so how much more now that he becomes the triple champ coming into UFC 300. That right there is an important marketing sell for the UFC if they were to pull that off. But the problem is, all that we're doing right now is just looking back at all of his past accomplishments, because we really are unsure of when he's going to come back. Because, again, I could be wrong. An announcement for his fight could somehow come at any given time, maybe even this week, maybe even next week, maybe even further into next month, or maybe in the upcoming months. The bottom line that you have to understand is this. The UFC has their reason as to why he is not being signed to a fight right now. And that could be a multitude of reasons that we really have to consider. One, the contract negotiations. They have to be very careful about how they are going to make these contract negotiations and meetings with Conor McGregor, because you got to take into consideration the guy has very few years left, especially if you want to continue to compete in the lower weight classes. Maybe the 165 division may be a much more healthier option for him, just based on the fact that he is getting older. And what better way to get older than to move up a weight class? That's really the most that he can do, right? And not only that, it's great for the UFC, but also they're also considering increasing 170 as 175, which I think is really interesting in and of itself, right? So 170 is going to continue to be the division that it was. They're going to keep the lineage that comes from that particular weight class. However, what is different and what they're going to do that's a bit unique is, well, they're going to add 5 pounds over to the original weight class that it was contested for, which, by the way, isn't really the worst thing in the world. You know how many people there are that pretty much get into these situations of, let's say, weight drain or just extra weight cuts that they don't need, right? Which creates a different dynamic. Total different dynamic in terms of how they're going to strategize with weight classes. But again, the variations of that, I guess, really just depends on different fighters and, their different body structures or where they are at in terms of their particular weight. But, okay, that's neither here or there, right? We're not here to talk about how this new weight class is going to pretty much be different or not so different, or how it's going to affect different fighters, but rather understanding the trajectory of Conor McGregor's career right now. So who this guy is right now is not who he was. And let me give you guys a rational explanation or a very good comparison to this. For one, take this into effect. Everlast, the rapper who was also a country blues singer later down his career, right? So he basically lived 2 different careers. He was his rap star from House of Pain, if you guys remember the song Jump Around. And then he was also a blues singer with the song You Don't Know What It's Really Like, which, by the way, is one of the biggest hit songs that you could probably hear in random rock stations around the United States, if not around the world. So Everlast says that when he was in a Joe Rogan podcast, he explained to Joe, saying that, you know what, this particular song is not really something that I own, which I think is really interesting. What does he mean by that? What he means was that now that song is so commercial and so well known that it belongs to the universe. Well, guess what? This is the same comparison that I have for Conor McGregor. All the accomplishments that he's done with a 13-second knockout with Jose Aldo, the 2 exciting fights that he's had with Conor McGregor, even though one of them was a loss. Also, to take into consideration the fights that he's had with Eddie Alvarez, also being able to get a boxing fight with Mayweather and the lead up to it. He's had an illustrious career, even with Khabib. A big loss in his career, yet one of the biggest paydays of his life. Nonetheless, all of these things that Conor McGregor has accomplished and has accumulated all throughout his career, including the Cage Warriors double championship as he multiplied and redid in the UFC, is all legendary. But the problem is he doesn't own it anymore. So now the same Conor McGregor that we are seeing today, it's not the same guy that we knew back in 2014, 15, 2016, the height of his career, and even after that, after 17 through 2018 and 19, we started seeing a dwindle, which, by the way, it really band-aided the situation when he beat Donald Cerrone. And I gotta tell you why. Because it proved nothing. Conor, with the type of notoriety that he has, he deserves title fights. But he has to continuously win these big matchups like the Dustin Poirier fight. He had to win that. In order for us to say that, you know what, the only man that could have truly beat Conor McGregor was Khabib at 155 and a blown-up Nate Diaz, who is not a real 155er, and even that, they both fought at 170, which gave the edge to Nate Diaz. So you can constantly make an argument for Conor McGregor, and then on top of that, the submission loss that he's had against Duffy early in his career, and then that Ivan guy who is now a 125er or doesn't even fight anymore, but pretty much ended his career as a 125 fighter. Those two submissions, you can pretty much forgive, right? Early in his career, all he needed to do was just win against Dustin Poirier. He didn't, with two different circumstances that come to play, right? One, the Donald Cerrone fight, I told you, band-aided the entire career of Conor McGregor. We didn't really see what was wrong. We didn't really understand what he needed to fix, because guess what? Donald Cerrone's got great jiu-jitsu, but he's got great stand-up, and we already know that at the time, Conor McGregor was the best stand-up fighter in MMA. That was until Khabib knocked him over with that overhand right, which, by the way, started the dwindle of his career. And here we are now in the present time. So now there's still many unknowns for Conor McGregor, and that's all that I can really spew for this man's particular past accolades, great memories as fans that we could remember him by. But for now, this is literally the current trajectory of Conor McGregor. Unsure, unsigned, and unknown. But don't forget to like and subscribe so that I can be known to the algorithm of YouTube, inshallah.